Number 15. The giant bull. Approximately 11,000 years ago, somewhere along the river plains of what is now Poland, a hunter raised a flint-tipped spear at an animal that should not have existed. It stood 1.8 meters at the shoulder. It weighed over 1,000 kilograms. Its horns curved forward from its skull in a sweep more than a meter wide, sharp enough to puncture a human chest with a single sideways flick. This was the aurochs, the wild ancestor of every cow alive today. And it killed more hunters across 40,000 years of European prehistory than any other large mammal on the continent. In 1827, a Polish forester named Adam Czechowicz published an account of the last known wild aurochs in the Jaktaro forest. The animal died in 1627, struck down by an unknown illness after a population that had survived the Ice Age, the rise of agriculture, the fall of Rome, and the medieval forest clearances finally collapsed under sustained human pressure. Researchers at the Polish Academy of Sciences confirmed in a 2010 genetic study led by Magdalena Smolska that the surviving heck cattle of modern Europe carry only fragments of the original aurochs genome. The animal itself is gone. What remains is its silhouette in over 200 cave paintings stretching from Altamira in northern Spain to Lascaux in southwestern France. But the truly unsettling aspect of the aurochs is not its size, it is the behavior recorded in those same paintings. Aurochs are shown charging hunters, goring them, throwing them through the air. The scenes are not decorative. Some researchers, including Jean Clatz of the French National Center for Scientific Research, argue these are records of actual hunting deaths, painted as warnings or memorials. The hunters did not always win. Sometimes the bull did. Consider what it took to kill one with stone weapons. A team of hunters would track a herd for days, isolate a single animal, and approach within 20 meters before throwing. A miss meant the bull would turn and charge. The fastest human in the world cannot outrun a charging aurochs over open ground. Hunters either climbed a tree, found high terrain, or died beneath the hooves of an animal that did not stop running until something killed it. And here's where it connects to us. Every cheeseburger you have ever eaten descends from the surviving captive cousins of this animal. 40,000 years of hunting did not erase the aurochs. Domestication did. We turned the most dangerous large mammal in Europe into livestock. The thing our ancestors prayed to before approaching, we now slaughter at industrial scale without ceremony. The fear they felt looking at a wild bull was a recognition of equality between species. We lost that recognition somewhere along the way. The animal stayed. The relationship died. What would you have carried into a hunt where the prey could turn the spear back into your chest? Because that is what every aurochs hunt was for 40,000 years. Number 14. The crowned beast. Approximately 700 years ago, in the peat bogs of what is now County Galway in Western Ireland, a male Megaloceros giganteus stepped onto unstable ground and sank into the dark water. The animal stood 2.1 meters at the shoulder. It carried antlers that spanned 3.65 meters from tip to tip, the largest antlers ever evolved by any animal in the history of life on Earth. Those antlers weighed over 40 kilograms. They were not for defense. They were not for survival. They were for terror. And when the bog claimed that single bull, it preserved the body intact, allowing researchers to recover it nearly 8,000 years later. The Irish elk, as it is commonly called, was not actually an elk and did not live only in Ireland. Specimens have been recovered from Spain, Russia, China, and as far east as Siberia. The Natural History Museum in London holds one of the most complete specimens. Researchers at Trinity College Dublin, led by Adrian Lister, published evidence in 2005 that the species survived in scattered populations until approximately 700 years ago, far longer than previously believed. The animal coexisted with the earliest farming communities in Europe, and it shared territory with humans who were learning to forge copper. However, the question that haunted 19th century paleontologists was how anything could carry 40 kilograms of bone on its skull through dense forest. The answer, established through modern biomechanical analysis at the University of Helsinki by Jussi Saarinen in 2018, is that the Megaloceros did not live in forests. It lived on the open Eurasian steppe and in cold grassland. The antlers were a sexual display, grown and shed annually, signaling male fitness to females across kilometers of open terrain. The cost of maintaining them was enormous. Some researchers believe that climate change at the end of the Ice Age reduced the availability of high-calcium plants. The animals could not replace the minerals lost to antler growth. They began to die. But humans helped. Cut marks on Megaloceros bones recovered at sites across Ireland and Russia confirm sustained hunting pressure during the final centuries of the species. Hunting a bull Megaloceros was not like hunting a modern deer. The antlers were weapons. A direct charge with that headgear could decapitate a wolf. Approaching the animal required the same patience and coordination demanded by aurochs hunting. The wounds on the bog specimens are not all from drowning. Some show puncture marks consistent with stone spear points. The last Megaloceros may have fallen to human hands. And consider what it meant to walk through a landscape where you could turn a corner and find an animal with a 13-foot crown of bone watching you from across a meadow. The Irish elk was not aggressive in the way a saber-toothed cat was aggressive. Yet its presence reshaped the cognitive map of every hunter who lived alongside it. You did not approach. You did not provoke. You moved around the territory of the crowned beast, and you taught your children to do the same. The last individuals died in scattered Russian valleys, around 5500 BC. By the time the pyramids of Egypt were built, the Megaloceros was already a folk memory in the minds of European herdsmen who could no longer say what those enormous antlers had belonged to. We inherited a world emptied of the largest deer that ever lived. We will never see one walk. Number 13. The steppe lance. Approximately 300 years ago, on the frozen plains of what is now the Sakha Republic in northeastern Siberia, a woolly rhinoceros calf stumbled into a mud flow and was buried within minutes. The mud froze. The calf froze with it. And in 2020, a team of Russian paleontologists working near the Terektiak River exposed the body, preserved with skin, hair, internal organs, and partially digested stomach contents. It is the most complete woolly rhinoceros specimen ever recovered. The carcass weighed approximately 130 kilograms. An adult would have weighed nearly 700 kilograms. And carried a single horn over a meter long, capable of impaling a mammoth. Colodonta antiquitatis was the woolly rhinoceros, the cold-adapted cousin of modern rhinos. It ranged from the British Isles to South Korea, an unbroken distribution across the entire mammoth steppe. Researchers at the Mammoth Museum of the Northeastern Federal University, led by Albert Protopopov, confirmed in their 2021 publication that the species persisted in Siberia until at least 14,000 years ago, possibly later. The animal was hunted across that entire range. Engravings on mammoth ivory from the Vogelherd Cave in Germany show woolly rhinoceros in mid-charge. Hunters depicted alongside them are running. The horn was the danger. Made of compacted keratin rather than bone, it could grow to 1.4 meters in length, longer than the human torso. The animal used it for foraging and for combat. A charging rhinoceros at full speed could exceed 30 kilometers per hour, and the horn was positioned to strike at the center of mass of any creature standing in its path. Cave paintings at the Chauvet site in southern France, dated to approximately 36,000 years ago, depict woolly rhinoceros with their heads lowered in attack posture. The artists understood the threat, so did everyone who had ever watched the animal move. What makes the woolly rhinoceros particularly haunting is its solitary nature. Unlike mammoths, which moved in herds, woolly rhinoceros lived alone or in small family groups. You did not encounter one as part of a hunt. You encountered one by accident. A foraging party rounding a hill, a child gathering berries near a stream, a hunting group following caribou tracks across the open steppe could turn and find a rhinoceros standing 20 meters away. The animal was nearsighted, but its hearing was excellent and its sense of smell extraordinary. Once it identified you as a threat, retreat was no longer possible. The horn came down, the legs began to move. The animal vanished from Europe roughly 12,000 years ago, from eastern Siberia slightly later. Climate change reduced the grasslands it depended on. Hunting pressure removed the breeding adults. The species collapsed across continents within a few thousand years, swift on geological scales, but slow enough that hundreds of human generations watched it diminish. Stories of the rhinoceros may have survived in oral tradition long after the animals themselves were gone. Some researchers suspect that medieval European legends of the unicorn descend, in part, from inherited memories of the woolly rhinoceros, an animal that did exist, that carried a single long horn, and that haunted the imagination of every northern hunter for 30,000 years. What we erased, we replaced with myth. Number 12. The land crocodile. Approximately 50,000 years ago, on the savanna grasslands of what is now central Queensland in Australia, an Aboriginal man returning to camp at dusk would have known to watch the line of dry creek beds for movement. Not because of snakes, not because of dingoes, because of an animal that should not have existed at all. A crocodile, 4 meters long, walking on legs adapted for sustained running on dry ground. Quinkana, the terrestrial crocodile of the Australian Pleistocene, an ambush predator built to hunt mammals across open country, far from water, with the same patience and explosive speed that defines its modern aquatic cousins. Most people picture crocodiles as semi-aquatic. Quinkana broke that picture. Researchers at the Queensland Museum, led by paleontologist Stephen Salisbury, confirmed in a 2002 study that Quinkana fortirostrum and its closest relatives possessed long limbs, narrow zyphodont teeth designed for cutting flesh, and a skull architecture optimized for terrestrial pursuit rather than underwater ambush. The animal could maintain a running pace across grassland for distances exceeding several hundred meters. It hunted by ambush, but it also pursued. There was nowhere safe from it once it began to move. The Aboriginal occupation of Australia began roughly 65,000 years ago. Quinkana was already there, and it persisted alongside human populations for tens of thousands of years, before disappearing approximately 40,000 years ago. During that overlap, humans and Quinkana competed for the same prey, sheltered in the same landscape, and crossed paths with results we will never fully reconstruct. Bone fragments recovered from caves in the Mount Etna region show evidence of crocodile feeding on large marsupial remains. Some researchers, including Mike Archer at the University of New South Wales, have suggested that Aboriginal hunting parties occasionally fell victim to Quinkana ambushes, though direct evidence is difficult to establish given the acidic soil conditions that destroy most human remains in tropical Australia. But here's where the story becomes unsettling. Aboriginal oral tradition preserves stories of a giant terrestrial predator that walked on legs and ate people. These stories were recorded by ethnographers in the 19th and early 20th centuries. They describe an animal that matches no creature currently living on the continent. The animal in those stories may be a folk memory of Quinkana, transmitted across roughly 1/500 generations from the last people who actually saw one. If that interpretation is correct, the Aboriginal oral tradition represents the longest continuous cultural memory of any extinct animal anywhere on Earth. What it means to look at a crocodile and see something that can chase you across a dry plain is something modern humans have lost the capacity to feel. Quinkana was not a monster from a story. It was an animal that lived for millions of years on the continent we now call ours. It hunted with intelligence, it killed with precision, and then it vanished, leaving only the bones in cave deposits and the warnings in songs whose original meaning has been forgotten by everyone, except a few elders who still know that the country has memories older than language. The land crocodile did not survive. The land that remembers it is still here. Number 11. The venomed tongue. Approximately 40,000 years ago, in the open eucalyptus woodland of what is now South Australia, the first humans to set foot on the continent encountered a lizard. Not a small one. Megalania prisca measured up to 5.5 meters from snout to tail and weighed somewhere between 600 and 940 kilograms, depending on which paleontologist you trust. It was the largest terrestrial lizard ever to have evolved, and recent biochemical analysis suggests it carried venom in its jaw. The genus is now classified as Varanus priscus, recognizing its position within the same family as modern Komodo dragons. Researchers at the University of Melbourne, led by Stephen Rowe, published a 2009 analysis confirming that Megalania possessed venom glands homologous to those found in the modern Komodo dragon and the Parenti. The venom was not designed to kill quickly. It was designed to prevent blood clotting and to lower the prey animal's blood pressure to the point of collapse. A single bite did not need to be fatal in the moment. The animal could follow a wounded creature for hours, even days, until shock and blood loss did the work. What this meant for early Aboriginal hunters is that survival depended on never being bitten. A glancing strike from Megalania would not kill an adult human immediately. It would set in motion a slow death from internal bleeding and bacterial infection, indistinguishable from disease. A hunter wounded by Megalania might walk home, lie down by a fire, and die 3 days later with no visible explanation. The cause of death would have been mysterious, perhaps attributed to spirits, perhaps to bad water. The lizard would already be gone. The lizard ambushed prey by wading in dense undergrowth and striking with the full force of its body. Its limbs were not built for sustained pursuit but for explosive lunges over short distances. Researchers at Flinders University, in collaboration with the South Australian Museum, recovered a partial skull in 2008 from sediments dated to approximately 50,000 years ago. The skull confirmed the venom delivery anatomy and the powerful jaw musculature capable of severing limbs in a single bite. The earliest Australians lived alongside this animal for at least 10,000 years before it vanished. Aboriginal stories from the Northern Territory and Central Australia describe enormous lizards that ate people. These stories, like those of Quincana, may carry genuine memory across hundreds of generations. The Bunyip legend, often associated with water-dwelling monsters in 19th-century settler accounts, may have absorbed older Aboriginal traditions about Megalania alongside other extinct megafauna. The continent's first human inhabitants saw apex predators that no later human ever saw, and they recorded what they saw in the only medium available, which was song. Megalania disappeared sometime between 40,000 and 25,000 years ago, the same window in which human population on the continent expanded. Whether humans hunted it directly, outcompeted it for prey, or simply increased pressure on the ecosystem during a period of climatic stress, remains unresolved. The likely answer is some combination of all three. The result is the same. The largest lizard in the history of the planet was driven extinct during the lifetime of the first people who walked the country it called home. Number 10. Wings from above. Approximately 700 years ago, on the South Island of what is now New Zealand, a Maori child playing near a forest edge looked up and saw a shadow cross the sun. The shadow had a wingspan of 3 meters. It had talons the size of a Bengal tiger's claws. It weighed up to 15 kilograms. And it dropped from the canopy at speeds exceeding 80 kilometers per hour, with enough force to drive its claws through the skull of any moa it targeted. This was Hyraetus morai, Haast's eagle, the largest eagle that ever lived. And it is the only confirmed example of an avian predator that actively hunted human beings within recorded oral history. The species was first described by Julius von Haast at the Canterbury Museum in 1871, based on skeletal remains recovered from swamp deposits in Glenmark Station. For over a century, scientists assumed the bird had been a scavenger, too heavy to be an effective predator. That interpretation collapsed in 2009 when researchers at the University of Adelaide, led by Paul Schofield, conducted a comparative skeletal analysis published in the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology. Their conclusion was definitive. The bird was a true predator. Its skull, talons, and muscle attachments matched those of active hunting raptors, not scavengers. It killed its own prey, and it killed prey larger than itself. The primary food source was the moa, a flightless ground bird ranging from chicken-sized to ostrich-sized. Haast's eagle hunted the largest species, attacking from above and crushing the moa's skull with a single strike. The same technique, applied to a human child, would have produced the same result. Maori oral tradition refers to a creature called te hokioi, a giant predatory bird with red and black plumage that hunted from the sky and was capable of killing people. For decades, ethnographers dismissed these stories as legends. Following the 2009 analysis, the stories have been reinterpreted as accurate descriptions of an animal that the first Maori settlers actually encountered and feared and occasionally lost children to. The eagle vanished between 1400 and 1450 CE. The reason was not climate, it was not disease. It was the extinction of the moa, hunted to oblivion by Maori settlers within roughly 200 years of their arrival on the islands. With its primary prey gone, Haast's eagle could not sustain its population. The species collapsed within decades. It is one of the fastest documented extinctions of an apex predator in human history, and it happened recently enough that European explorers reaching New Zealand in the 18th century missed it by less than 3 centuries. Consider the cognitive weight of living in a forest where the canopy could kill you. Maori communities developed specific behaviors to protect children from skyborne predation. Adults watched for shadows. Open spaces near settlements were patrolled. Stories told to children about Tikokioi were not metaphors. They were survival instructions. The fear of being snatched by a bird is something most modern humans do not carry. For the first Polynesian settlers of New Zealand, it was the daily reality of life in a country that contained the only known eagle in history that hunted people from the sky. The skies over Aotearoa are empty now. They were not always. Number 9. Beak of bone. Approximately 11,500 years ago, in the grasslands of what is now southern Patagonia, a small group of early Americans walking south along the Andean foothills would have stopped at the edge of a rise and watched very carefully for movement in the tall grass. The threat was not a cat, it was not a wolf, it was a bird. A flightless 3-meter-tall bird with a beak the size of a horse's skull and legs, adapted for sustained running at speeds exceeding 50 kilometers per hour. This was Forus racos, one of the terror birds. And while most of these predators had died out millions of years before humans arrived in South America, at least one species, Titanes walleri, may have survived into the Pleistocene long enough to encounter the first humans crossing the continent. The terror birds, formerly Forus racidae, dominated the South American landscape for over 40 million years, following the continent's separation from Antarctica. Researchers at the Argentine Museum of Natural Sciences, led by Federico de Grange, published a comprehensive review in 2010, confirming that the family included over 15 described species ranging from 1 meter to 3 meters in height. The largest, Kelenken guillermoi, possessed a skull 71 centimeters long. The bird could not fly. It did not need to. Its beak was a hooked weapon capable of stripping flesh from bone with a single downward strike, and its legs could run down most prey across open ground. When the Panama Land Bridge formed approximately 3 million years ago, the terror birds began moving north into Central and North America. Titanes walleri reached Florida and Texas. For a period of time, the dominant land predator across the Americas was a flightless bird. Whether any terror bird species survived into the Pleistocene long enough to overlap with humans remains contested. Some specimens from Florida have been dated to as recently as 15,000 years ago, but the dating is disputed. Researchers at the University of Texas continue to argue both sides of the question. What is not disputed is that the first humans to enter South America walked through a landscape where the memory of terror birds was still ecologically present. The animals that filled the niche of dominant terrestrial predator had only just shifted from birds to mammals. Saber-toothed cats and short-faced bears had partially displaced the avian apex predators, but the prey species and the landscape itself had been shaped by 40 million years of bird-on-mammal hunting. The grasslands of South America are still patrolled by flightless raptors. Modern Siriema birds and rheas are direct evolutionary descendants of the same lineage that produced the giants. Consider what it would mean to learn to walk as a child in a world where the dominant predators ran rather than crept, where the warning signs were not paw prints but 3-toed clawed footprints longer than a forearm, where ambush meant a strike from a beak that could fracture skulls. The terror birds shaped the entire ecology of the Americas for tens of millions of years, and even if they had vanished by the time humans arrived, the prey behaviors, the grass species, and the predator-prey dynamics they created persisted. The first Americans walked into an ecosystem still echoing with the absence of the birds that had ruled it. The terror is gone. The terrain it built is what we inherited. Number 8. Laughing Death. Approximately 35,000 years ago, in a cave system in what is now southwestern Germany, a Neanderthal child died. The body was not buried by family. It was carried, in pieces, into a separate cave several kilometers away. The bones were chewed. The marrow had been extracted. The skull had been cracked open and the brain consumed. The animal responsible was Crocodile spelaea, the cave hyena, a larger, stronger, more aggressive Pleistocene subspecies of the modern spotted hyena, and it was the most consistent scavenger and predator of human and Neanderthal remains across the entire Ice Age in Europe. Researchers at the University of Tübingen, led by Hervé Bocherens, conducted isotopic analysis of cave hyena bones recovered from sites across Germany, France, and Belgium. The 2011 study confirmed that hominin remains formed a regular component of cave hyena diet for at least 100,000 years. This was not occasional opportunism. Cave hyenas systematically targeted human and Neanderthal communities, raiding burial sites, dragging corpses from camps, and possibly attacking the wounded or sleeping. Bone fragments recovered from den sites at Hohlefels and Vogelherde contain identifiable Neanderthal and modern human remains, with bite marks and crushing damage consistent with hyena-feeding behavior. The cave hyena was significantly larger than its modern descendant. An adult could weigh up to 110 kilograms, roughly 25% larger than a modern spotted hyena. Its bite force exceeded 4,500 newtons, sufficient to crush the long bones of horses and even the lower limbs of juvenile mammoths. The animal hunted in clans of up to 30 individuals and patrolled territories spanning hundreds of square kilometers. It did not fear fire. It did not fear noise. It learned to identify human settlements as reliable sources of meat and return to them across generations. This is what makes the cave hyena particularly haunting. It was not just a predator, it was a thief. It stole the dead. Communities that buried their loved ones in shallow graves outside their living caves would return to find the graves dug up, the bones scattered, the corpses partially consumed. The psychological weight of this on early human societies is difficult to overstate. Anthropologists, including Tim White at the University of California, Berkeley, have argued that the development of deep burial practices and the construction of cairn graves across Eurasia between 50,000 and 30,000 years ago may have been a direct response to hyena predation on the dead. We learned to bury our dead deeper because something kept eating them. The cave hyena vanished from Europe approximately 10,000 years ago, replaced by smaller, less aggressive forest carnivores. Its descendants survive in Africa, where the spotted hyena remains one of the few large predators that still consistently kills and consumes humans in modern times. The relationship between hyenas and humans is not ancient, it is continuous. The fear our Ice Age ancestors carried about animals that came in the night to take their dead is the same fear East African villagers still carry about the animals that come in the night for their children. Some predators do not need to be larger than you, they only need to be patient. The cave hyena was both. Number 7. The hidden hunter. Approximately 46,000 years ago, in a limestone cave in what is now South Australia, an early Aboriginal hunter pressed his hand against the wall to leave an impression of his presence. The cave was named Narra Corte Caves National Park in modern times. The hunter is not named anywhere in any record. But 20 meters away, in a sediment layer dated to the same period, archaeologists recovered the partial skeleton of an animal that had been using the cave as a den. Thylacaleo carnifex, the marsupial lion, the most powerful mammalian predator pound for pound that has ever been documented in the fossil record. The species was first identified by Sir Richard Owen at the Royal College of Surgeons in London in 1859, based on skeletal material shipped from Australian colonial expeditions. For over a century, paleontologists argued about whether the animal was actually a predator or a specialized herbivore. The debate ended in 2008 when researchers at the University of Sydney, led by Stephen Rowe, conducted a comprehensive biomechanical analysis. The skull, dentition, claw morphology, and shoulder anatomy all confirmed that Thylacaleo was a specialized hyperpredator. Its bite force exceeded that of any living mammal of comparable body mass, including modern lions and tigers. The animal weighed between 100 and 160 kilograms. It was not large by African big cat standards. What made it deadly was its weaponry. The forelimbs ended in thumb claws over 15 centimeters long, retractable like a cat's, used to grip and disembowel prey. The jaw carried specialized blade-like premolars that functioned as scissors for slicing through flesh and severing spines. The animal hunted by ambush from above. It climbed trees. It dropped onto its prey. And it killed by gripping the throat with the front limbs and crushing the spine with a single jaw stroke. Aboriginal cave paintings in the Kimberley region of Western Australia, dated to over 40,000 years ago, depict an animal matching the proportions of Thylacoleo. These are among the earliest known representations of an extinct megafauna species created by humans who had actually seen the animal alive. Researchers at the Australian National University, led by June Ross, confirmed in their 2016 publication that the depicted creature includes anatomical features unique to Thylacoleo, including the distinctive thumb claws and the rounded skull morphology. Living alongside Thylacoleo required a different kind of vigilance from living alongside ground-based predators. The threat came from above. Hunters camping under trees in eucalyptus woodland could be attacked while sleeping. Children playing near tree lines could be taken without warning. The marsupial lion did not roar. It did not stalk visibly. It waited in the canopy and dropped. This is the kind of predator that does not produce stories of dramatic confrontations. It produces stories of people who simply did not come back. The disappearance is the entire encounter. The animal vanished sometime around 46,000 years ago, almost certainly as a consequence of human arrival on the continent. The largest marsupial carnivore that ever lived was driven extinct within the first few thousand years of human occupation of Australia. The cave paintings remain. The skeleton fragments remain. The thumb claws, 15 centimeters of curved keratin and bone, remain in museum drawers in Sydney and Adelaide. The animal itself is gone. So is the part of the human imagination that needed to fear the trees above its head. Number 6. Pack from Pleistocene. Approximately 13,000 years ago, somewhere on the open plains of what is now Southern California, a horse stumbled into a sticky pool of natural asphalt and could not free itself. The cries attracted attention. Within minutes, a pack of predators descended on the trapped animal and were themselves trapped in the same tar. Over the course of the next several thousand years, this pattern would repeat thousands of times. The result is the largest concentration of Pleistocene fossils on Earth. The site is Rancho La Brea, in central Los Angeles. The most numerous predator preserved there is Aniacon dirus, the dire wolf, and over 4,000 individual specimens have been recovered from the tar. The dire wolf was once classified within the genus Canis as Canis dirus. In 2021, researchers at the University of California, Los Angeles, in collaboration with multiple international institutions and led by Angela Perry, published a landmark genetic analysis in Nature. Their conclusion was startling. Dire wolves were not closely related to modern gray wolves. They had diverged from the wolf lineage approximately 5.7 million years ago and represented a separate evolutionary radiation. The animals were reclassified as Aniacon dirus, the terrible wolf, a name reflecting their evolutionary distance from any modern canid. The dire wolf was larger and more powerfully built than the modern gray wolf, weighing up to 68 kilograms. The skull was broader, the teeth larger, the bite force significantly stronger. The animal specialized in hunting Pleistocene megafauna, including ground sloths, juvenile mammoths, ancient bison, and horses. It hunted in packs that may have exceeded 20 individuals, coordinated through vocalizations and scent marking across territories larger than those of any modern wolf population. When humans arrived in North America roughly 16,000 years ago, the dire wolf was already the dominant pack-hunting predator on the continent. The two species competed for the same prey. Cut marks on Pleistocene bones recovered from sites in the American Southwest indicate that humans and dire wolves were sometimes scavenging the same carcasses, with evidence of direct competition. There is no recovered evidence of dire wolves actively hunting humans, but the ecological pressure on early American populations was severe. Hunters who killed a bison risked having the carcass stolen by a pack of dire wolves within hours. Hunters caught alone on open ground at dusk could be surrounded by an organized group of 20 animals whose combined biomass exceeded 1,000 kilograms. What makes the dire wolf particularly significant is the depth of its evolutionary lineage. This was not a wolf. It was a separate experiment in canid predation, conducted across nearly 6 million years on a continent that had its own predator dynamics for that entire period. When the first humans crossed Beringia and entered the Americas, they encountered an entire ecosystem of predators that had evolved independently from anything in their experience. The dire wolf was the dominant pack hunter of that ecosystem. and it was already in decline by the time they arrived. The species vanished approximately 11,000 years ago, coincident with the extinction of its primary megafauna prey. Whether humans accelerated the collapse through hunting competition, or whether climate change alone destroyed the prey base remains debated. The result is the same. The pack hunter of the Pleistocene Americas is gone. What we call wolves today are something else. They look similar. They are not the same lineage. The dire wolf, the wolf that was not a wolf, ran the plains of the Americas for almost 6 million years and ended in a tar pit in Los Angeles. Number 5. The tallest predator. Approximately 22,000 years ago, on the open tundra of what is now central Alaska, a small human band traveling south along a glacial meltwater stream stopped and went silent. Something was moving in the willow scrub 200 meters away. The shape that emerged was not a deer. It was not a wolf. It was a bear. But when it stood 3.5 meters tall. Its head reached higher than the top of any tent the group had ever constructed. This was Arctodus simus, the short-faced bear, and by every metric used to measure terrestrial mammalian predators, it was the largest predator that ever inhabited the Americas. The species was first described by Joseph Leidy at the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia in 1854, based on fragmentary remains from Kentucky. The taxonomy has been refined repeatedly. Modern researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, including Blaine Schubert, confirmed in their 2018 publication that adult males could weigh up to 957 kilograms and stand on hind legs at heights approaching 3.7 meters. The animal was not just large, it was built for speed. Its legs were proportionally longer than those of any modern bear. It could run at sustained speeds exceeding 50 kilometers per hour over open terrain. The diet remains contested. Some researchers, including Paul Matthias at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, have argued that Arctodus was primarily a hypercarnivorous predator that actively hunted bison, horses, and possibly mammoths. Others have argued that it was a specialized scavenger, using its size to drive other predators away from kills. Recent isotopic analysis suggests the actual answer is both. The animal hunted when conditions favored hunting and stole from other predators when conditions favored theft. There was no predator on the continent that could effectively oppose it. A pack of dire wolves would surrender a kill rather than face a single short-faced bear. The implications for early humans are unsettling. The short-faced bear was the dominant predator of the Pleistocene Americas during the first millennia of human occupation. There is no evidence of direct hunting of humans, but the threat was constant. Human groups crossing open landscape would have needed to maintain awareness of bear territory, scent markers, and movement patterns. A human running from Arctodus could not outrun it. Climbing a tree offered limited safety, given the bear's ability to stand and reach over 4 meters into the canopy. Caves and rock shelters could not be approached without checking whether the bear had taken up residence inside. What makes Arctodus particularly haunting is the period of overlap with humans. The first Americans walked into a continent where the apex predator was not a cat. It was a bear taller than any modern grizzly, faster than any modern bear, and possibly more aggressive than any predator currently living on land. The cognitive load of moving safely through such a landscape would have shaped every cultural practice, from camp placement to travel routes to seasonal migration patterns. The earliest archaeological sites in North America are positioned with consistent reference to defensive geography. Hills, narrow valleys, river bluffs. The reasons were not just about humans hunting other humans. They were about staying out of bear country. The short-faced bear vanished approximately 11,000 years ago. The reasons are the standard reasons of the Pleistocene extinction: loss of large prey, climate disruption, and possibly human pressure. The tallest predator the Americas ever produced disappeared during the first 1,000 years of human occupation. The bears that followed are smaller, slower, and less dangerous. We inherited a continent that had been emptied of its largest carnivore before we were old enough to write down what it had been. Number 4. Stranger in the cave. Approximately 70,000 years ago, in a limestone cave in what is now Switzerland, a Neanderthal hunter entered the dark interior carrying a torch made of pine resin and bone. The intention was shelter from a winter storm. The cave was already occupied. The animal sleeping at the back of the chamber was not a wolf. It was not a hyena. It was Ursus spelaeus, the cave bear. A massive Pleistocene bear specialized for hibernation in deep caves across Europe and Central Asia. Adults could weigh over 700 kilograms, and while the species was predominantly herbivorous, an awakened cave bear in the closed space of a hibernation den was capable of killing any human or Neanderthal who entered. The species was first scientifically described in 1794 by Johann Christian Rosenmüller, who recovered skeletal material from caves in Bavaria. The bone deposits in some European cave systems contain the remains of thousands of individual cave bears. The Drachenhöhle cave in Austria has yielded fossils from over 30,000 bears, accumulated over tens of thousands of years of repeated winter hibernation and natural deaths. Researchers at the Senckenberg Research Institute, led by Hervé Boharens, published comparative analysis in 2019, establishing that cave bears were primarily plant eaters, with a diet composition more similar to modern pandas than to omnivorous brown bears. Yet the size of the animal, combined with the close quarters geometry of cave habitation, made it an apex threat in the specific context of cave entry. What makes the cave bear particularly significant is the role it played in human and Neanderthal religious life. Bone caches arranged in deliberate patterns have been recovered from sites including Drachenloch in Switzerland and Rigordou in France. The arrangements show selection bias towards skulls and large limb bones, often placed in specific orientations within the cave geometry. Researchers, including Emil Bachler in the 1920s, originally interpreted these as evidence of ritual deposit by Neanderthals. Modern analysis is more cautious. Some arrangements are now considered natural accumulations from rockfall and water movement. Others, however, retain their interpretation as deliberate placement. The debate over whether Neanderthals practiced a cave bear cult is unresolved after a century of research. What is not debated is the practical relationship between Pleistocene humans and the cave bear. Caves were essential shelter during glacial periods. Cave bears used the same caves for hibernation. The two species competed for identical real estate across a continent. Skeletal remains from multiple sites show evidence of human and Neanderthal predation on cave bears, with cut marks on bones and arrangements consistent with butchery. The bears were hunted, but they were also feared. The act of entering a cave during winter was an act of calculated risk. Sometimes the cave was empty. Sometimes it was not. Cave paintings at Chauvet, dated to approximately 36,000 years ago, include depictions of bears. The most striking is a single bear skull, placed deliberately on a rock pedestal at the back of one chamber, illuminated by firelight in the original deposit context. The skull was not from a fresh kill. It had been carried into the cave and arranged. Whether this was art, ritual, memorial, or simple curiosity, we will not know. We do know that the people who placed it understood the animal it had once belonged to. They had hunted it, they had hidden from it, and they had brought one of its skulls into a sacred place. The cave bear vanished from Europe approximately 24,000 years ago. Climate change reduced the plant resources it depended on. Human and Neanderthal hunting may have provided the final pressure. The largest hibernating mammal of the European Pleistocene died out before the last glacial maximum reached its peak. The caves it left behind became the canvas for the first human art. Number 3. The long knife. Approximately 12,000 years ago, on the savanna grasslands of what is now Southern California, a single saber-toothed cat lay dying in shallow water. Its left forelimb had been broken months earlier. The bone had partially healed, but the animal could no longer hunt effectively. It was starving. It dragged itself to the edge of a tar seep to drink. The asphalt held it. Its body sank slowly into the dark organic preservative that would keep its skeleton intact for the next 12,000 years. The animal was Smilodon fatalis. And of all the predators of the Pleistocene, none captured the imagination of every later human civilization more thoroughly than the saber-toothed cat. Smilodon fatalis was the most common large predator preserved at the Rancho La Brea tar pits, with over 500 individual specimens recovered. The animal weighed between 160 and 280 kilograms, comparable to a modern Siberian tiger, but with a fundamentally different body plan. Smilodon had shorter legs, a more massive chest, a shorter tail, and the famous elongated canine teeth that reached 28 centimeters from gumline to tip. These were not display structures, they were hunting weapons. Researchers at the University of California, Los Angeles, led by Wendy Binder, conducted biomechanical analysis published in 2007 that confirmed the saber teeth were used in a specialized killing technique. The cat would immobilize its prey using its powerful forelimbs, then deliver a precise bite to the throat, severing the carotid arteries and the trachea simultaneously. The bite force was actually less than that of a modern lion. Smilodon could not crush bone the way an African lion can crush a wildebeest's neck. The saber teeth were too long and too narrow to survive a struggling prey animal. The cat had to pin its target completely before biting. This required ambush hunting from cover, with explosive acceleration over distances under 20 meters. The animal could not run down prey over open ground. It had to wait, evaluate, and strike. When humans arrived in North America roughly 16,000 years ago, Smilodon fatalis was already the dominant ambush predator across the continent. Hunters traveling through wooded valleys, brush country, or river edges would have encountered cats that weighed more than themselves and carried teeth visibly extending below the jawline even when the mouth was closed. Direct attacks on humans almost certainly occurred, though direct evidence in the fossil record is rare. What is well established is that humans and Smilodon competed for the same prey species. Ancient bison, horses, ground sloths, and camels were food for both species. The competition was direct and continuous for thousands of years. The cat vanished approximately 10,000 years ago. The extinction was rapid. Within roughly 1,000 years, the dominant ambush predator of the Americas was gone. Climate change reduced the dense brush ecosystem Smilodon depended on for ambush hunting. The collapse of large prey species removed its food base. Whether humans contributed directly through hunting pressure or indirectly through ecosystem disruption is debated. The result is unambiguous. The saber-toothed cat survived for over 2 million years across multiple continents and went extinct during the same window in which human population began its exponential expansion across the Americas. Every depiction of a saber-toothed cat in modern culture descends from imagination, not memory. No human alive has ever seen one move. Yet the image of the elongated canines is so iconic that nearly every child in every literate culture knows it. The animal we never met is the animal we cannot forget. Number 2. The Vanished King. Approximately 40,000 years ago, on the cold steppe of what is now central Idaho, a male Panthera atrox killed an adult horse and dragged the carcass into shallow scrubland. The cat weighed over 350 kilograms. It stood roughly 1.2 meters at the shoulder. From nose to tail tip, it measured nearly 3.7 meters. This was the American lion. And by every measurement applied to the fossil record, it was the largest cat species in the history of evolution. The species was first described by Joseph Leidy at the Academy of Natural Sciences of Philadelphia in 1853, based on fragmentary remains from Mississippi. For over a century, debate continued over whether Panthera atrox was a true lion, a closely related but separate species, or an extinct subspecies of the modern lion. The debate was largely resolved through paleogenetic analysis. Researchers at the University of Tübingen, led by Joachim Berger, conducted DNA extraction from American lion specimens recovered from the Yukon permafrost. The 2009 publication confirmed that Panthera atrox was a distinct lineage that had diverged from the cave lion approximately 340,000 years ago. It was a separate species, related to but distinct from the African lion and the European cave lion. The size estimates of Panthera atrox are extraordinary. Modern African lions, the largest cats currently alive, average roughly 190 kilograms for adult males. Panthera atrox averaged nearly 25% larger. Specimens recovered from the La Brea tar pits include individuals exceeding 410 kilograms. The animal hunted bison, horses, camels, and ground sloths across an enormous range that extended from the Yukon to central Mexico. The hunting strategy is believed to have involved cooperative group attacks, similar to modern lion prides, though the social structure cannot be confirmed from fossils alone. When humans entered North America, the American lion was already present. The two species shared prey, territory, and habitat for several thousand years. The fossil record contains no direct evidence of human predation on Panthera atrox, but skeletal damage on some specimens suggests interactions with other apex predators, including dire wolves and short-faced bears. The American lion was at the absolute top of the food chain. Its presence shaped every other species in the ecosystem, including, almost certainly, the early human populations that had only just arrived on the continent. What makes the American lion particularly haunting is the implication of its size. The animal was not different from a modern lion in any fundamental way except scale. Its anatomy was a modern lion's anatomy, enlarged. Its skull was a modern lion's skull, enlarged. Its teeth, claws, and musculature were the same as those of the African cats you can see today in zoos and on documentary footage, but proportionally larger. If you understand what a modern lion is capable of, you understand what Panthera atrox was capable of, plus 25%. A single cat could weigh more than 2 modern lions combined. A pride of them could have killed a juvenile mammoth. The species vanished approximately 11,000 years ago, in the same extinction wave that erased the dire wolf, the saber-toothed cat, the short-faced bear, and most other large mammals across the Americas. The world we inherited contains no cats of this size. The largest carnivores currently alive are tigers, polar bears, and African lions, all of them smaller than what walked the western plains of North America when humans first arrived. The vanished king of the Pleistocene was the largest cat that ever lived, and our species shared a continent with it for several thousand years before it was gone. Number 1. The God in the Stone. Approximately 32,000 years ago, in a limestone cave system in what is now southeastern France, a small group of humans descended deep into the dark interior of the rock. They carried lamps fueled by animal fat. They carried pigments mixed from ground hematite and charcoal. And on the deepest wall of the cave, in a chamber that required several hundred meters of crawling and climbing through narrow passages to reach, they painted lions, not as decoration, not as record, as prayer. The cave is Chauvet, the lions are Panthera spelaea, and the relationship between Ice Age humans and the cave lion is the relationship that defines this entire list. The animal we feared most became the animal we worshipped most. Panthera spelaea was the cave lion. It ranged across all of Eurasia from Spain to eastern Siberia and across the Bering Land Bridge into Alaska and the Yukon. Adult males weighed between 270 and 320 kilograms, somewhat larger than modern African lions and possessing a different body plan, with a slightly longer torso, shorter legs, and a more uniform coat color. The species was first described by Georg August Goldfuss at the University of Bonn in 1810, based on a skull recovered from a German cave system. Researchers at the Mammoth Museum in Yakutsk, in collaboration with the Royal Holloway University of London, and led by Albert Protopopov, published the most complete soft tissue analysis in 2018, based on 2 frozen cub specimens recovered from the Siberian permafrost. The cubs preserved skin, fur, internal organs, and even whiskers, allowing reconstruction of the animal's appearance with unprecedented accuracy. The cave lion was not actually a cave dweller in the way the cave bear was. It hunted in the open, primarily targeting reindeer, ancient horses, and juvenile mammoths. The name comes from its habit of dragging kills into cave entrances for consumption and from the high concentration of cave lion bones found in cave systems across Europe. Cave hyenas and cave lions competed for the same caves, and skeletal evidence suggests the 2 species occasionally killed each other in territorial disputes. The lion did not fear humans, it did not avoid them. It hunted the same prey, occupied the same landscape, and almost certainly killed individuals from every Neanderthal and modern human population that lived alongside it for several 100,000 years. But here is where the story becomes something other than predation. Cave lions appear in human art across an enormous range and across tens of thousands of years. The paintings at Chauvet, dated to approximately 36,000 years ago, are the oldest known. Other depictions appear at Lascaux, at Trois Frères, at Combarel, at Pecmerle, at Cusack, at dozens of sites across France, Spain, and the Urals. Lion Man figurines carved from mammoth ivory have been recovered from Hohenstein-Stadel in Germany and dated to approximately 40,000 years ago. The Lion Man is among the oldest known sculptures of a clearly mythological being created by anatomically modern humans. It is a figure with a human body and a lion's head. It is approximately 31 centimeters tall. It is older than agriculture, older than writing, older than every god currently worshipped by any living religion on Earth. What this means is the cave lion was not merely an animal to be feared. It was the model for the first divine archetype in the human imagination. Researchers including Nicholas Connard at the University of Tübingen, who recovered the Lion Man during reconstructive work on excavated cave deposits, have argued that the figurine represents one of the earliest pieces of evidence for symbolic religious thought in our species. The Ice Age humans who carved it did not see a lion as merely a predator. They saw a lion as something more than physical. They saw a being whose power could be invoked, whose attributes could be borrowed, whose form could be combined with the human form to create something neither fully human nor fully animal. This is the earliest evidence in the archaeological record of what would later become every god in every pantheon. The cave lion vanished approximately 12,000 years ago. The extinction was part of the broader Pleistocene megafauna collapse that erased most of the large predators across Eurasia and the Americas. By the time the first agricultural civilizations were emerging in Mesopotamia and the Nile Valley, the cave lion was already a memory carried in the cave art of European caves no one was visiting anymore. The lion-headed gods of ancient Egypt, Sekhmet, and others may have been inherited memory of an animal that had been gone for thousands of years by the time the first pharaohs were buried. The lion, as a symbol of royalty, of divinity, of power, traces back to a real animal that real humans feared in real darkness, and then transformed into something they could carry with them when the darkness ended. The animals on this list killed our ancestors, they ate our children, they drove our species into hiding for hundreds of thousands of years, before the development of agriculture, fire-hardened weapons, and coordinated group defense allowed us to push back. Yet what we did with that fear is what separates us from every other species on the planet. We did not just survive these predators, we painted them, we carved them, we sang about them. We turned the things that hunted us into the things we worshipped, and we carried those gods forward into every civilization that followed, long after the actual animals had vanished into the permafrost and the cave deposits. The cave lion is gone. The lions in our stories are not. We outlived our predators, and we made them immortal. If you want to see more videos like this one, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.